The life and work of famed choreographer Jerome Robbins, a beautiful shadow play you can watch from home, and a friendship that will melt your heart, a dog, a rabbit, and a Manhattan woman devoted to animal rescue. It's all coming up on Nonstop New York. Hi, and welcome to Nonstop New York. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. As we head into midsummer, our fabulous hometown is starting to return to a new kind of normal. It's been a difficult few months for our city, but needless to say, we still love New York. So today, we're bringing you a few favorites from past episodes, as well as a story about a heartwarming friendship that all you animal lovers will not want to miss. We kick things off with a deep dive into the life of choreographer and director Jerome Robbins. Lisa Beth Kovitz explores the indelible mark he left on New York and the world of dance.
Jerome Robbins was one of the most influential American choreographers, dancers, and directors of the 20th century. His many masterpieces include West Side Story and Fiddler on the Roof. Jerome Robbins has forever altered the face of both Broadway and ballet.
Robbins was absolutely inspired by New York City. I would claim that it's his primary muse, that he saw himself and I think saw his way of being and way of seeing new things, like in his artworks, very much by his investigation of what was around him. He grew up in Weehawken, born in Manhattan, but grew up in Weehawken, New Jersey. And what I love about this footage is that his feet may be in New Jersey, but you see that skyline behind him, and that's where his aspirations and his dreams and his future really will be, on the island of Manhattan. The other thing that I love about this rooftop scene is that he had a pretty tortured relationship with his family, but here you see him being joyful, he's young, he's smiling, which we often don't see too, and he's ready to take on the world.
Robbins burst out onto the scene in 1944 with the ballet Fancy Free, about three sailors on leave in New York. It was the first of his famous collaborations with then budding composer Leonard Bernstein.
You can see the ways in which, when you're able to focus on both the movement and the music, how both Robbins and Bernstein are sort of shattering previous ideas of what music and dance could be, taking vernacular sound and movement and pairing it with more formal classical tradition in both music and ballet.
8 months later, this hit ballet became Robbins' first hit Broadway show, On the Town. From this success, Robbins joined the New York City Ballet, becoming the associate artistic director and choreographing more Broadway shows. With partners Stephen Sondheim, Leonard Bernstein, and Arthur Lawrence, Robbins brought sneakers, snapping, jazz movements merging with ballet, gangs, and the pulsating streets of New York, things no one had ever seen before on Broadway or film.
He really has come to be at the top of his field in both Broadway and musicals, whether on stage or screen, as well as ballet by this point. He gets an Oscar, he gets a key to the city, he gets recognized by the mayor of New York. He has literally created a place for himself in the city and in the arts.
But depression and feelings of inadequacy plagued him his whole life. He wrestled with his Jewish identity, his attraction to men, and whether people really loved him. Jerome Robbins created works until almost the end of his life, co-directing the New York City Ballet, developing new ballets, and a Broadway retrospective.
Broadway, it is woven into the fabric of our city, and we miss it right now. But the theater world will rise again with dazzling productions, including lavish costumes that can take your breath away. So where do those costumes come from? Andrew Falzone went behind the curtain to a Queens costume shop.
Sometimes, you know, you're on the subway on the way to work and it's like, oh, there's that Scar costume that I spend all my days laboring on.
Cora Levin has worked her way through different shops in Manhattan's niche costume industry. For the past 5 years, she's been working at Parson Mears, currently firsthand to the shop's owner, a job that couldn't be any more hands-on.
So I pin it together and I hand it to her and she sews it and then she gives it back to me and I take it to the ironing table and press it.
Rolls of fabric fill racks stacked to the ceiling on one side of the shop, and on the other, threads in every color you can imagine. Those are just some of the tools of the trade at a place where everything is created from scratch. The shop owner is Sally Ann Parsons, who also worked her way through the costume world in New York City. She learned the craft from the late Willa Kim and was later given an unanticipated opportunity by the late Ray Diffin.
And then I kind of got into running a business because he decided to go do something else. And he said, oh, here, take over my business. Well, my husband and I knew nothing. I mean, nothing about running a business. So I kind of learned on the job.
But that didn't stop Sally Ann and husband James Mears from growing the shop into a thriving business. In 2016, she received a Tony honor for excellence in the theater. Opened in 1980, the shop has helped bring to life some of the best-known shows in Broadway history.
Well, we're the shop that Cats built, because that was actually our first big show. We did Starlight Express. We still work on Phantom of the Opera. Obviously, we work on many productions of Lion King at the moment. We work on Aladdin, which is open now. We work on Hamilton. We're constantly making parchment-colored things for Hamilton.
The shop is a menagerie of costume creations. When we visited, we saw these leather pieces being hand-cut for the actor playing Scar in The Lion King, and this outfit custom-made for Rafiki in The Lion King. Regardless of the client, every project starts out with the same questions.
Imagine what you would have to do to make this costume. Like, what is it made out of? What will we have to buy? How much will that cost? How many hours do you think it would take to do it? And actually, we're a very labor-intensive kind of business, so it's actually the hours that it takes to make it that is the crucial factor.
We found Cora hard at work on this large green and orange torso piece that would help transform a human into living landscape in The Lion King. You can't imagine how long it takes to complete.
Hundreds of hours. I mean, there are 3 of them. Hundreds of hours for 3. But yeah, I mean, this, obviously you can see all this time I've spent just pinning it, and then someone has to go to a sewing machine and sew down all these places that I'm pinning. And then there's more handwork to do it. So yeah, some of these costumes are very involved.
So the next time you see a Broadway costume, that outfit may have gotten its start at a costume shop in Long Island City. I'm Andrew Falzone for Nonstop New York.
Now to a photographer who shows us New York City and some other famous places in ways we've never seen before. Before the pandemic, I had the chance to sit down with photographer Stephen Wilkes at the Bryce Wolkowitz Gallery in Chelsea. Stephen, thank you so much for talking with us today.
It's a pleasure.
So your book of photographs is called Day to Night, and wow, it is remarkable.
Oh, thank you so much. The work was really, it started when I was, it started here in New York City. And I love New York, and it was sort of like my love letter to New York City. The first picture was actually in the High Line here in New York City. It started as a single assignment it was New York Magazine. And upon scouting, I was there at lunchtime, and then I was there in the evening, and it was this amazing difference. I remember being on the phone with the photo editor. I said, how would it be if I could do day and night, south to north, in one image? And she was like, oh my God, could you do that? Normally, either I'll build a scaffolding on a location, or I'll find an incredible special rooftop, or I'm in a crane, anywhere from 12 to 18 hours. Some of these pictures are actually 36 hours, the wildlife images that you see. There's nothing automated about what I do. I sit and I look and I react to what my eye sees, and I take very specific moments, like a street photographer, over anywhere from a 12 to 36 hour period.
Stephen, how many images might go into one of the final images that we see?
I'll shoot anywhere from 1,200 images to 2,200 images for one, photograph. But I will edit down to 50 on average of the best single moments that happen from the day into the night. What you're seeing is 50 of the best moments seamlessly blended into one single photograph. Each one of these takes months to finish.
The photos are beautiful, but to me, they're also a little bit haunting, because all of a sudden I feel like I'm confronting time.
Yeah, people have said, there's almost a surrealistic aspect to my work, in the sense that it's photographic and you're looking at reality. I'm putting a face on time, which we've never been able to really do.
What was the biggest challenge you ever came across in terms of just physically being able to be there, to be in the one place?
I was physically in the nests of northern gannets for 36 hours, and the amount of guano and the sound, and let's just say it was, and they're not, I mean, I love birds, but northern gannets are not nice birds. They're
They weren't super happy to see you.
no, and when you get within 3 feet of their nest, they like to stab you with their beaks, and they particularly like your calf muscle. So I was perpetually under attack. I had to wear a hard hat because there was so much guano being dropped on me. 36 hours of that, and I was standing for 36 hours on volcanic rock that was so unstable that if you shifted your weight, it felt like your ankles were breaking. I mean, so just imagine that for 36 hours. It was unbelievable.
Do you have any sort of like particular quirks or rituals or things that get you going as you start, a day's work or 36 hours of work?
I like to feel uncomfortable. I know that sounds funny, but it's, I know then that I'm pushing myself into an area and I'm taking a risk. If I feel too comfortable, I know I'm not working hard enough.
Stephen, thank you so much for all your time today. It was such a pleasure meeting you, and your work is fascinating.
Oh, thank you, Carol. It was so nice to be with you.
We first told you about Feathers of Fire last summer. It's been described as a feast for the senses that combines shadow play and puppetry. And now it's available for streaming. Susan Junn has more.
Cinematic shadow play, audiobooks, and a pop-up book. It's all part of a larger project to highlight Iranian culture. It's a magical journey through shadows and time, telling the story of star-crossed lovers from 10th century Persia, all the while creating a window into Iranian culture.
I wanted to create something that talks and introduce the highlight of my culture into the Western society, because everything you hear in this, today's about us is just negative.
Guggenheim Fellow, filmmaker, and visual artist Hamid Rahmanian came to the U.S. from Iran in 1994 to earn his master's. Initially hoping to open a graphic design firm, Rahmanian ended up finding a greater purpose for his art by bringing Iranian literature and visual traditions to the stage in the production of Feathers of Fire, based on the Persian epic Shahnameh.
Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings, the longest poem written by a single poet. The reason that we Iranian today speaking Persian because of this book. So it's like a national identity of the Iranian cultures.
The drama unfolds on screen in front of the audience as it plays out live behind the screen with a combination of performers in 3D costumes and masks, puppets, scenography, and digital animation, all of which come to life as a live animation shadow play which molds modern animation with ancient shadow theater. The breathtaking visuals appear as actors perform backstage behind a 36 by 15-foot screen, while two large light projectors cast their shadows onto the screen. Adding to the action, small puppets and miniature sets with color gels are illuminated into colorful, larger-than-life images. Created in his Brooklyn studio, Feathers of Fire is just one part of a larger multimedia project that has occupied the last decade of the New York City artist's life.
I sat down and over a course of 4 years create an illustrated edition of Shahnameh,
which resulted in a 600-page illustrated adaptation introducing a visual culture of the Middle East to the Western audience. In addition to the dramatic audiobook of Shahnameh, Rahmanian decided to create a visually stunning pop-up book from one story in the collection called Zahak. Based on that story, a small puppet show was created.
I got approached from the Brooklyn Academy of Music, from Metropolitan Museum, to create something bigger.
From which Feathers of Fire was born, introducing people from all walks of life to Iranian culture.
When the kids or young adult, they see this show and they learn about the culture, when they go back and they hear something negative, they have something positive in their mind so they can compare with.
Rahmanian is currently working on the concept and funding for another shadow theater production, through which he can once again share the beauty of his culture.
Up next, a comedian who combines social commentary and humor, reminding us that a good laugh is universal. Barry Mitchell introduced us to Negin Farsad in 2018.
Meet Negin Farsad, just another Iranian-American Muslim female comedian, author, filmmaker, podcaster.
Like most comedians, I have a master's degree in public policy and another one in African American studies.
Of course.
Yeah.
Today, comedy with a social conscience from the outrageous Negin Farsad.
I tried to fix the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by dating a Jewish guy. It didn't work.
Tell us about your podcast, Fake the Nation.
Fake the Nation is a political comedy roundtable. It's me and a rotating cast of comedians. We gather every week to talk about the news, to scream about democracy.
Once you get into that lawyer stuff, I just feel like I'm reading the back of a Tylenol bottle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just zone out.
Your book is called How to Make White People Laugh.
I call it a memoir meets social justice comedy manifesto because I talk about a lot of the stuff that I've done with comedy as an activist. I am Iranian American, I'm also Muslim.
As a social justice comedian, it's my goal to convert these haters because they hate a lot of things which lead to negative outcomes, like racism, violence, and Ted Nugent.
What is your go-to routine to make white people laugh?
My mom was like, Negin, why are you scared? Have you had intergender flesh relation?
Everyone has a weird family. It's like something very universal. It's something that really brings people together. It's like, oh, is your mom out of her mind? So is mine.
Negin was looking for a project to merge comedy with social justice and community service.
A live Muslim is here to answer your questions.
That led to the documentary
Muslims, you know they are coming.
We just let the gays in recently.
We rounded up a bunch of Muslim American comedians in a nonviolent way, and we went around the country to places like Alabama and Tennessee and Utah, just places where they love the Muzzies.
Can I invite you to a stand-up comedy show? It's absolutely free. It's tonight at 8 o'clock. It's called The Muslims Are Coming. There's a bunch of Muslims on stage, but they're hilarious.
And we did shows there, but the idea was to really bridge the gap, to try and dispel Islamophobia.
You know the eclipse? We did it for Allah.
I'm standing in the middle of the dance floor, and I see this dude checking me out. And so I did what any good Muslim girl would do, and I allowed him to grind up on me right here.
In the film, you had these little booths on the street, Ask a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the questions people down south asked you?
Well, how do you feel about 9/11?
As a New Yorker, obviously, I think 9/11 was like traumatizing and horrible. But because that's not a message that's being spread effectively, people still have that question. I've been exposed to more cultures than the average American, and I like people. So if anyone ever gives me the opportunity, to share with them my story in exchange for also hearing theirs, that's a win for me.
Barry Mitchell, Nonstop New York.
We all know New York City rises to the occasion no matter what. So today we've got a love letter of sorts to the Big Apple. In a piece from this past winter, Neil Rosen takes a look back at some classic romantic movies with New York City in a starring role.
New York, New York, New York, New York, New York, it's a wonderful town.
New York City has been the setting for countless romantic movies. The sights and sounds of the Big Apple naturally lend themselves to the language of love, and the cinema has captured that magic in all its glory for over a century.
One of the most famous locales that's been used in movies over and over again is the Empire State Building and its observation deck, which is where I'm standing right now.
In 1993's Sleepless in Seattle, Tom Hanks plays a widower who has a chance at love again when his young son deceptively arranges for him to meet the woman he feels he was destined for, played by Meg Ryan. This romantic scene takes place at the top of the Empire State Building on its observation deck. The film borrowed that choice of locale from the 1957 classic An Affair to Remember with Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr, who planned a rendezvous at the top of the building on a specific date and time. That movie was actually a remake of 1939's Love Affair with Irene Dunne and Charles Boyer. Same meeting place and basically the same story.
That's it right there. It's the tallest building in the world. You can't miss that. It's the nearest thing to heaven we have in New York.
And Love Affair was remade again in 1994 with Warren Beatty and Annette Bening, with the Empire State Building taking center stage. No look at the Empire State Building love stories would be complete without a look at King Kong. Both the 1933 and 2005 versions utilized the building for the mighty ape and his love interest, originally Fay Wray and later Naomi Watts. Woody Allen has chosen our city for most of his movies, like here in the Oscar-winning Annie Hall. Then there's Woody's aptly titled love story Manhattan, which features this well-known shot.
This is really a great city. I don't care what anybody says. It's just really a knockout, you know?
One of my favorite romantic comedies of all time is When Harry Met Sally, as Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan romp around the city, playing a couple who are perfectly made for each other, but they just don't know it yet.
Yes! 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 Oh!
I'll have what she's having.
1960's West Side Story was filmed on location in various spots in New York, and is based on perhaps the most famous love story ever written, namely Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Washington Square Park, along with its famed arch, is the setting for the climax to Neil Simon's charming 1967 romantic comedy, Barefoot in the Park. Brooklyn is the setting for 1987's Moonstruck, as Cher and Nicolas Cage engage in a somewhat rocky romance.
Snap out of it!
Mila Kunis and Justin Timberlake are New York friends with benefits, but there's true love lurking underneath it all. The on-location Grand Central Station flash mob scene is one of the movie's highlights. Finally, no look at New York love stories would be complete without mentioning Breakfast at Tiffany's from 1961. Audrey Hepburn never looked more stylish or elegant than here as Holly Golightly, as she falls for her neighbor, played by George Peppard.
Oh, I love New York.
And we love it too. It's the perfect place for romance, as depicted in these movies, and dozens more, which are all available to stream or rent on DVD.
For many of us, our pets have been lifesavers during these long days at home. They are more than companions, they're family members, like Hudson here, who's already been on the show more than once this summer. So we end today's episode with a friendship that will melt your heart. A dog, a rabbit, and a Manhattan woman devoted to animal rescue. Meet Teddy Sarah. Today, she works in a hospital as a successful child life specialist. She's also a vegan lifestyle blogger and animal rescue advocate with a large Instagram following. But when she first moved to New York, that wasn't the case.
So when I first moved here, it was actually after a pretty tough year, and I had lost my dog. I'd had some other really challenging things that happened, and I was just really feeling sad, and I knew that dogs always made me feel better. So one night, I literally Googled animal shelters near me, found Animal Haven, started volunteering, worked my way up to fostering. I actually think I still am the person who's fostered the most dogs.
At Animal Haven, Teddy ended up fostering over 20 dogs on their way to permanent homes, some for days, others for a few months. Then she met Pawnee.
Pawnee was found by a construction worker when she was in Iran in the Middle East, and her back was broken. And they believed someone had kicked her very hard and sort of just thrown her out on the streets. And so she actually survived for a full month, paralyzed, injured on the streets of Iran.
Pawnee was eventually sent to the United States and Animal Haven, where Teddy volunteered to foster her and supervise her rehab. She began sharing Pawnee's progress on Instagram and her blog. She wanted everyone to know how amazing rescue dogs can be.
My followers have still been so amazing and supportive. One day when I was at Animal Haven visiting Valentina, another dog who I would take to rehab, I saw she was on the cement floor, and I went to get her a blanket, and they were out of blankets because those they get all from donations. So I shared it on my Instagram, and by the time I woke up, my followers had already donated over 200 blankets.
Wow. Teddy worked hard with Pawnee's rehab facility, Water for Dogs, and Pawnee started showing real results.
We've been going to rehab for almost 2 years now, and she's made so much progress there. She has a wheelchair, which she was fitted for at Water for Dogs. We use it outside, and it just gives her a whole new lease on life.
Somewhere in the process, Teddy decided there was no way she could give Pawnee up. While her fostering days were over, her heart and apartment were full with Pawnee and her rabbit, Hank.
Well, dinner time is funny because one of Pawnee's favorite foods is lettuce. I swear I can't make this stuff up. I got a dog. I was already vegan, and I ended up with this dog from Iran who's obsessed with lettuce. But so whenever I try to feed Hank, Pawnee breaks into his cage, steals the lettuce. They're running around, both trying to get the lettuce.
These days, Teddy has her hands full with Pawnee and Hank while still volunteering at Animal Haven. Through it all, she says it's the animals that make the difference.
I think in a city that is so crazy and hustle bustle, it's so important to have something you love that can ground you and take you out of all the craziness of New York City and just remind you about what's important and loving. And there's so many different animals and so many amazing shelters in New York City that can provide amazing pets for people that I just think having a pet brings so much joy into life, really no matter where you are. But in New York City, it's a really special thing.
That is it for this month's episode. We hope we gave you a smile and a reminder about some of the things that make our city one of a kind. We would love to hear about your Nonstop New York, so please tag and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. Be well, and thanks so much for watching.